with something that's quietly reshaping the global balance of power, the rare earth minerals. But interestingly, most of us wouldn't even know their names. Dysprosium, terbium, neodymium, but we use them all day, every day. Our smartphones, our laptops, our electric vehicles and whatnot. But more critically, in fighter jets, missile guidance systems, radar arrays, and so much more. But the problem is, China mines over 60% of the world's rare earths and processes over 80% of them. And in 2025, Beijing began weaponizing that dominance. From export controls on gallium and germanium to sweeping restrictions on 7 heavy rare earth elements by April 2025. Minerals have now become the new geopolitical currency. And now, the US-Iran conflict in early 2026 exposed just how fragile American military supply chains really are, and how deeply this crisis connects to the wars being fought today. To unpack all of this, I'm joined by Dr. Ananya Arora, international economist and former IMF advisor, Ambassador Avantika Tyagi from the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs, and Ms. Amrita, Security Analyst at UNSC. Welcome all. Dr. Arora, let's start with you. For anyone watching who isn't familiar with economics, why are rare earths so strategically important? And why is China considered to be dominant when we talk about rare earths?
Thank you, Shruti, first of all. Let me first just start off by saying that the term rare earth magnates is actually very misleading in itself. Because these rare earth metals that we talk about aren't so rare geologically, if we see. They're found in every part of the world, including Brazil, Australia, US, and even in India, if we take for example. So the real issue here becomes processing of these metals. Refining rare earth ore into usable oxides in permanent magnates requires this complex chemical separation process. So if we talk about China, it has invested billions of dollars and decades into this technology. And one by one, it's building its industrial infrastructure. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it started in the 1980s itself. So today, China produces roughly 90% of the world's high-performance rare earth magnates, as you rightly said. So that is an extraordinary monopoly itself. So especially when we are talking about such a unique input that sits at the heart of clean energy transition, the semiconductor industry, and advanced defense systems. So if I come to the direct economic consequences of these supply disruptions, after China imposed these export restrictions in April of 2025, so prices of these mineral components surged as expectedly. And in just 3 months, I think we saw a rise of about 5% in prices. So for global manufacturers, obviously it was, it created production delays, cost inflation, and a very deep uncertainty about where exactly they can source these metals from now.
Indeed, Dr. Arora. Now moving forward, Ms. Amrita, from a strategic standpoint, how concerning is this level of concentration in a single country?
It is in fact very alarming, Shruti. Let me give you one concrete data. The United States currently has just one major manufacturer of rare earth magnets that handles most of the process. Just one. Meanwhile, China produces around 90% of the world's supply. So you can imagine the US response when China imposed restrictions in December 2025, limiting rare earth exports to companies linked with foreign minerals. This directly affected the US defense sector, including the fighter jets, missile systems, radar, and even the drones. In response, the US has been trying to build its own supply chain, from mining to final production to reduce dependence on China. But despite investing over $400 million since 2020, it is still far from achieving the goal. Realistically, this could take several years, possibly even a decade.
rivalry didn't begin overnight. So, Ambassador Tyagi, from a global perspective, from a global governance perspective, how exactly do you think we have arrived at this point?
You're absolutely right, Shruti. This issue has been building for years. China first used rare earth minerals in 2010 and it restricted its exports to Japan. The world noticed, but there was no long-term response to it. Over the time, as US reduced its own mining due to environmental concerns or costing issue or production issues, China continued investing in processing and global supply chains. As a result, the US became very much dependent on world for the processing and of all these rare earth minerals. By 2025, when the trade tensions escalated, and China responded them with trade restrictions, making this issue much more serious. From the UN's perspective, if I say, this is no longer an economic issue. It is becoming a part of global power competition, with risk especially for developing countries that highly rely on stable supply chains.
I think I would like to add this point that if you see China's strategy, it has been very sophisticated and diplomatic. In the sense that it is very much aware of the fact that if by any chance it overuses its export restrictions, it will definitely accelerate the world's drive to build alternative supply chains. So presently we see it moving very diplomatically and very strategically, if I say. It's creating enough uncertainty in the world right now to extract concessions at the negotiating table, and it's also not permanently surrendering its natural advantage. So it's a very strategic point at which China is playing.
Adding on to that, the US response has been a mix of diplomacy and domestic investment. In October 2025, it signed an $8.5 billion minerals agreement with Australia. It also launched Project World, a $12 billion public-private stockpile partnership. And in early 2026, it introduced Forge, a coalition of over 50 countries to build an alternative mineral supply system outside China's control. But the reality is all of this takes time. These projects can take years, even decades, to fully develop. Right now, the US cannot match China in mining or processing. So its only real option is technologically leapfrog, using AI-driven processing, recycling, and alternative materials.
Dr. Arora, so let's zoom out to the global economy now. So now, what exactly does this mineral rivalry mean for developing countries, particularly, and from the perspective of supply chains, inflation, and in general, the global south? How would it?
I am actually very glad that you asked this question, Shruti. If we talk about the ripple effects, they are very significant and they are often very much overlooked. So, if we talk about when China imposed its export restrictions in 2025, the US auto industry and global manufacturing saw immediate slowdowns and often even collapse, right? So, supply chains for EVs, wind turbines, medical devices and consumer electronics all depend on these minerals. So, we have to understand that any disruption in this increases the cost, it delays production, and it also leads to inflation for consumers worldwide. So we're not talking about just one country over there. So if we talk about the developing economies, this creates challenges, of course. Countries like Democratic Republic of Congo, which produces 70% of the world's cobalt, and Indonesia and Chile, with their lithium reserves, are now at the center of global competition. So, This creates both opportunities and risks. Opportunities in the sense of investment in technology transfers, and risks because without strong institutions to back it up, it can and will definitely lead to unequal deals where powerful countries dictate the terms.
From the UN's perspective as well, this is exactly the situation, the kind of situation we have been warning about. When critical resources become tools of geopolitical rivalry, the countries that suffer the most are those with the least bargaining power, if we talk about them. The energy transition from solar to wind power to electrical vehicles was meant to benefit everyone. But if these minerals become politically divided, we risk a split global system. One led by China and its partner, and the other led by the US and its allies. In that case, developing countries may be forced to choose one, or risk being left out altogether.
So now that we're approaching the close of our discussion, I want to give each of you 60 seconds to offer your most critical insight or your most urgent recommendation, I'd say. So Dr. Ananya, you first.
So I think I would start off by saying that market forces alone cannot fix this. The rare earth supply chain failure is a very classic market failure example that all of us study in economics, and it has resulted from decades of underinvestment, degradation, and short-termism. So the solution that we are looking forward to in the future needs to be sustainable, and it needs a multi-administrative approach which permits reforms, which invest heavily on technological infrastructure, and permits multi-framework models like Forge, for example, like Amrita you said, and it needs to be backed by real financing. So countries like India really need to be integrated as processing and value addition partners, especially if we look at its significant deposits. And we really need to stop looking at such countries as just suppliers.
That's right.
Like I said previously, the most dangerous outcome is a world split into two groups, one led by China and the other led by US, with developing countries stuck in between. We need strong global agreements to ensure fair access, fair pricing, and to prevent these resources from being just used as a political tools or instruments. Otherwise, control over resources could replace military power as a way to dominate others.
Adding on to Avantika's point, the US is in a race that it is currently losing. To catch up, it needs AI-driven processing, large-scale rare earth recycling, and strong partnership with allies like Japan, Canada, Australia, etc. Australia is especially important here. It has world's third largest rare earth resource. It's a Five Eyes partner and is emerging as the most viable Western alternative to China's supply dominance. The Dominance Act, Project Wall, and FORMA are steps in the right direction. But strategy without speed is just a plan. If the US does not achieve processing independence within 5 years, its military and technological capabilities could depend on an adversarial power, which no nation can accept.
3 perspectives, 1 conclusion. Rare earth minerals are no longer just chemistry or geology. They are the story of who controls the future. Clean energy, advanced technology, military power, and so much more. So the economies, the governance, the security, every thread leads back to the same question. Whoever controls the minerals controls the future. So the only thing that is left to decide is whether the control is shared or fought over. Thank you very much for watching.